Hi everybody, welcome back, and if you are new, welcome. My name is Gabby, and if you've never been here before, never watched any of my videos, have no idea what I do, I cover true crime cases, and all of the cases that I cover are a little bit older. They're all basically 20 years or older, so if that's something that you might be interested in, maybe go down below, click that subscribe button, and also make sure to turn on the post notifications to be notified every time that I upload. If you are a long-time viewer of mine, you may already know this, but Jane and John Doe cases are very high up on my list when it comes to cases I am always extremely eager to cover. Strangely, when I looked back on my channel, I have not covered an unidentified persons case in about 7 months, so it was obviously time to do another one. Today's case is one that has definitely been covered a few times here on YouTube before by some great true crime YouTubers, some of my friends, but I've been requested quite a lot to cover it myself. Before I get into the actual case though, I do want to say that today's video is sponsored, and it is sponsored by Factor. Factor is owned by another food-related company that I adore and I've worked with previously, and that's HelloFresh. I love switching between the brands, just like with Green Chef. Factor is a tad bit different though than the other two. It is an always fresh, never frozen meal prep subscription service that delivers restaurant quality meals to your home every week. With Factor, you can skip the extra trip to the grocery store, the chopping, the prepping, and the tiresome cleaning up. I know that I personally get extreme cooking fatigue from figuring out what I want to make. Factor cuts all of that out while still giving you the flavor and nutritional quality that you desire. I know that myself and so many other people out there, this is why I like working with companies like this, we are trying to cut some corners because groceries are very expensive. Not only is Factor effortless, cost-effective, and a sustainable choice, but it also tastes incredible. There's different options like Chef's Choice, Keto, Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Vegan and Veggie. There are 35 gourmet meals to choose from every single week. They also have over 60 different add-on items that you can choose from every week. I have been obsessed with these little wellness shots. I have mine here that has lemon, apple, ginger, honey, turmeric, and black pepper. Just gives you kind of a boost of energy throughout the day. If you want to try Factor yourself, head to factor75.com or click the link below in the description of this video and use code gabulosis50 to get 50% off of your first Factor box and 20% off your month of orders. Just like my lovely viewers, it is companies like Factor that really help me keep my channel going. Thank you, Factor, for sponsoring today's video. Now, let's get right into the case. Today, we are diving into the case of Little Miss Lake Panasoffkee. Lake Panasoffkee is a census-designated place, or CDP, in Sumter County, Florida. As described on bestplaces.net, living in Lake Panasoffkee, Florida is a paradise for nature lovers. With its abundance of wildlife such as white-tailed deer and bald eagles, it's easy to feel at home in the natural beauty of this area. For those who enjoy fishing, Lake Panasoffkee offers ample opportunity for anglers with bass, bluegill, speckled perch, and catfish, all available in the lake. This area does attract its fair share of tourists, and any website meant to grab the attention of travelers will highlight its perks, but that doesn't mean there are sections where people are not desperately struggling to get by. For instance, I am from Daytona Beach, Florida originally. It is a huge tourist attraction for primarily bikers and college spring breakers. We would see people traveling to our home with more money than they knew what to do with, while a lot of us were struggling to put dinner on the table. While many sites will claim Lake Panasoffkee as a serene vacation destination, there is an entirely other side to the story that we have to take into consideration. Just like the case we're discussing today, there's always more to the story. Let's now get into the date and discussion. On Friday, February 19th of 1971, 53 years ago, two teenagers, John Margolin and Charles Sutton, Illinois natives, were hitchhiking along Interstate 75 north from Tampa. Their ultimate goal was to get to New Orleans to celebrate Mardi Gras on February 23rd. I-75 is mostly used by people traveling through Florida, coming from Georgia, or heading to Georgia, whether Georgia is their ultimate destination or they are just trying to travel through the state to another state. It's mostly used by people to get to some of the main vacation spots in southern Florida. It starts out almost going down the center of the state, then it veers off to the west, then cuts right across the bottom of Florida from west to east. The two teenagers were making their way over the Lake Panasoffkee Bridge near mile marker 322. When one of them looked down and beneath the highway overpass, they spotted something that immediately sent a shiver down their spine. They could see a human hand in the water below them, just peeking out next to a branch. They originally thought it to be an alligator, and you'll see why based on what the victim was wearing. In shock, they showed their traveling companion what they saw. John would later tell the Ocala Star-Banner that it didn't take them long after that to realize that they were looking at a dead body. The two of them knew that they had to contact local authorities immediately. They waved down a highway patrolman after that. They explained what they saw over the bridge, backup was called in, and the boys were taken in for further questioning. They were extensively questioned until authorities realized that the body had been there for some time. After authorities carefully removed the woman from the water, she was taken in for examination. They believed that the woman right off the bat was a victim of homicide. She had a man's size 36 belt wrapped around her neck, and her cause of death was ruled as being ligature strangulation. Ligature strangulation is a strangulation done by some sort of cord, such as a rope, chain, wire, even a shoelace, something that is not human hands. They checked the woman's pockets, and she had no identification on her, so she was, and still is, classified as a Jane Doe, an individual, in this case deceased, with the mystery lingering of their actual name and identity attached to it. Years and years later, when they realized it was not going to be easy to identify her, they would end up giving her the name Little Miss Lake Panasoffkee, or sometimes she is referred to as just Little Miss Panasoffkee. The name Little Miss Lake Panasoffkee was given to this victim actually in the 80s by a man who dearly cared about this case, and we'll talk about him a lot during this video, and that is Jamie Adams. When there is a Jane or John Doe who is a murder victim, their first goal is to, of course, identify the victim. There are cases out there that almost worked in reverse, where authorities ended up discovering who the killer was before discovering the identity of their victim, or in some of those cases, the victim is still today unidentified. Little Miss Lake Panasoffkee is believed to have been strangled by the belt and then tossed off the bridge approximately a month before her body was found. The post-mortem interval is believed to have been 3 weeks to a month. She was most likely killed in mid-January of 1971. This doe had brunette hair and possibly brown eyes. Her height was guessed to be between 5 feet 2 inches tall and 5 feet 5 inches tall, and she was guessed to have weighed between 110 to 120 pounds in life. Her autopsy was conducted by Dr. William Schutz, and based on his examination, it is believed that she had given birth at least once in her life, possibly multiple times. So this woman may have a child or children out there somewhere who have no idea what happened to their biological mother. She is believed to have been between the ages of 17 to 24. From my understanding, though, they do lean more towards her being in her very early 20s now, but throughout the years, there were separate times where they thought that she could have been in her late teens. Like they do in pretty much every case, they took a look at the victim's teeth, which teeth can, as we know, be a factor that helps identify somebody because all of our teeth are very unique compared to each other's. She had extensive dental work done. This includes quite a few fillings and a porcelain crown on her front right tooth. A lot of does, primarily Jane Does, are discovered with no clothing on. It could be due to the killer not wanting them to be identified sooner based on distinct articles of clothing, or it could be due to a sexual assault. This doe was found wearing clothing, and her clothing was quite eccentric. An outfit that may make you do a double take and think, wow, that is quite a color-coordinated ensemble. The composites that I'm getting ready to show you of her clothing were released thanks to the University of South Florida, who have worked very closely with this case. The first article of clothing she was wearing was a very bright green t-shirt. Very plain though, nothing on it. She had on green plaid patterned pants. Her shirt definitely would have brought out one of the colors in the plaid on her pants. Then there is her poncho, also described as a shawl. It was thick, almost like a blanket. It was a white and green floral pattern. Some sources say it had yellow in it. She also was wearing nylon underwear. She was wearing this thick shawl, so I was curious just about how cold the temperature was at the time that she would have been killed. I was unable to see the temperature in Lake Panasoffkee in January of 1971, but I was able to see Tampa, which is about an hour southwest. I went to January 19th, exactly a month before she was found, and the average temperature was 53.9 degrees. so it would have been a bit chilly out. Something that can also help identify a victim is jewelry. A lot of the time, if the motive for the murder is robbery, then of course jewelry will be taken, but this doe was found wearing items of jewelry. She had on a small gold necklace, a gold Baylor watch on her left wrist, and she also had a ring on her left ring finger. This ring was gold with a clear stone. It could have been a wedding ring. She may have been married. When it comes to the Baylor watch, this is something that I spent a lot of time on. Baylor watches were really known as giving a more luxury feel for a more affordable price in the world of watches, and they were primarily sold at the time in Zales jewelry stores. I am, after we find out some more information about her, going to come back to the watch near the end of this video. For 6 months, the Sumter County Sheriff's Office did what they could with the tools available to try to identify the young woman found floating in the water of Lake Panasoffkee, but efforts were fruitless. They spread flyers and the case was covered in local newspaper articles, but it didn't seem like anyone in the area knew who she could have been. There was really nothing else that they could do at this time to point them in the right direction to solve this case any further, so they felt like it was time to give her a proper burial. Little Miss Lake Panasoffkee was laid to rest in Oak Grove Cemetery in Wildwood, Sumter County, Florida, under a metal marker that read Jane Doe, 1971. They hoped, though, that one day she would lie peacefully under a marker with her actual name on it. This case sat at a standstill for years until someone else came along and decided it was time to take another look at it. That person was Sheriff Jamie Adams of the Sumter County Sheriff's Office. He unfortunately passed away on September 15th of 2022 without seeing this doe identified. But at the time, years and years ago, he went through the process of having her exhumed for more testing. He wanted to see with the advancements in technology that there had been in the past 15 years, if they could discover anything else about her that may help them give her her name back. Her remains were exhumed on February 18th of 1986. Sheriff Adams decided to have forensic anthropologist Dr. William Maples of the University of Florida examine her by conducting a second autopsy. Dr. Maples would discover that she had had an orthopedic surgery done to her right ankle. They believed that this surgery had been done between the years of 1967 to 1970. The type of procedure she had done is conducted by drilling holes in the leg bone and then winding the tendon through it. It is referred to as the Watson-Jones or modified Watson-Jones technique, and its overall goal is to provide lateral ankle stability. After the surgery, it may take up to 8 weeks for you to be able to even put any pressure on that ankle the surgery was done on. They believe that she may have possibly, due to this, walked with a bit of a limp. Sheriff Adams and Dr. Maples believed that whatever physician out there conducted this procedure on her would definitely remember it. Possibly, if they spread this new information about the Jane Doe, that the doctor who did the surgery would come forward. So they posted a bulletin to doctors in the area and quite a bit of ways out of the area. Unfortunately, though, that doctor who did it never came forward. Doctors were reached out to in the hopes that one of them was possibly responsible for it. It didn't seem like any of them were the ones that had conducted it. Sheriff Adams had sent out over 3,000 flyers to law enforcement agencies nationwide and contacted hundreds upon hundreds of hospitals. Still nothing. According to a newspaper article released by the Ocala Star-Banner on May 14th of 1989, Dr. Maples stated that he believed the victim to be Native American and that she possibly had birthed at least 2 children. Sheriff Adams also hired a man for the case named Tom Kelly. He was a Continental Country Club resident. He had no prior experience when it came to law enforcement or being involved in a criminal investigation, but he had experience in the military and when it came to genealogy. Dr. Maples discovered that the victim also had a cracked rib. Tom Kelly would tell the Ocala Star-Banner in the article that I referred to before that they believed this crack in her rib may have come from the killer having her bent over their knee while they tightened the belt around her neck. Something that I personally did not see anywhere when it came to this cracked rib, and something that I thought of myself, is that maybe it could have come from the fact that she was thrown over the bridge. Maybe when he was trying to throw her over the bridge, she cracked her rib on the railing. Of course, I'm not an expert, but it's something that immediately kind of came to my mind. Another man on this case who's still alive today was Sheriff Lieutenant Bill Farmer, who would tell the Ocala Star-Banner that if this murder had happened during that time in the 1980s, that he thinks they would have been able to identify her sooner. He and pretty much everyone else working on this case believed wholeheartedly that it was the elapse in time that was working against them. Another technique that they used at this time had to do with dental. Her skull was taken to Orlando, Florida, where forensic dentist Dr. Thomas G. Ford took a photo of her teeth, and with this photo was able to enter it into a national dental record database on the computer. Unfortunately, her teeth matched no one's on there. Tom Kelly thought, okay, so maybe instead of looking at the victim herself for right now, let's look at the killer. Who could this killer be? So he took a look at arrest records around the time that she was murdered. There was one record that really caught his attention. The arrest record highlighted an arrest made on a man who had been crossing the median on I-75 in January of 1971 with a gun in his hand. He was taken into the department after almost being hit by the sheriff at the time, Fred Rosell. Tom Kelly told Ocala Star-Banner that this man was their only person of interest at the time. But based on the fact that there were never any solid updates regarding this man and his possible involvement in this case, I'm going to have to assume that he was eliminated as a person of interest. I can see though why they wanted to take a closer look at this man, considering he was arrested in January of 1971, about a mile from where Little Miss Lake Panasoffkee would be found a month later. It is noted that this man, never named in the newspapers, we don't know his name based on public records, he was nervous and kept pleading to be released when they were questioning him about why he was walking along the median with a gun in hand. Sheriff Adams and Sheriff's Captain Ed Galvin knew that they also wanted to have a clay mold and sketches done of what this victim possibly looked like in life. A clay model was done by artist Betty Pat Gatliff and showed what Little Miss Lake Panasoffkee may have looked like before extreme decomposition. In 1988, Sheriff Adams decided to consult with a forensic artist named Linda Gleaner. Her specialty was taking photos of people's skulls and x-rays, and from there being able to draw up a sketch of what they possibly looked like while they were alive. She created her original sketch and also a series of sketches of what the victim may have looked like at younger ages, age regression drawings. This technique had actually never been used before in an investigation. Their main goal for doing these age regression photos is that possibly a teacher may recognize who the victim was. Someone who maybe didn't know the victim when she was older, but possibly taught her when she was a younger age, 12 or 6 years old. Linda Gleaner said, though, that it was common for artists to sketch progression photos of fugitives so people could see what they possibly looked like years after the crime that they committed to see if anyone knew them in current time. Regression photos had never been tested, though, to see if anyone knew someone, a victim, years prior. It would be the clay model, though, that brought in a tip to the department that made them perk up. A woman named Louise Hudson out of Clearwater, Florida, claimed that she met a runaway in 1970, and she believed this runaway may have been their Jane Doe. She stated that the girl had been a runaway from another state. She never knew what state it had been. But this girl spent a lot of time around Clearwater Beach, which is about 90 miles southwest of Lake Panasoffkee. This woman stated that the girl that she knew said her name was Carol, and that Carol had a prior ankle injury and had been pregnant and was forced to give up her baby, and as a result ran away from home. That the first time she ran away, her parents had actually hired a private investigator and she was forced to go back home. Based on this information, we can only assume that she was younger than 18. The woman told authorities that the last time she saw Carol, she was leaving the area with a few men from Tampa. The woman, though, never learned the name of these 3 men or where they were all headed from there. Unfortunately, that wasn't much to go off of, and this did not get them anywhere closer to identifying her. I was unfortunately unable to find out if they did anything further in Clearwater Beach to see if anyone there remembered her and could give more information. This is kind of just where this tip ended. The next update in this case wouldn't come until 1992. During mid-May of 1992, filming crews were spotted around the Lake Panasoffkee Bridge and the Oak Grove Cemetery. What were they filming for? Unsolved Mysteries. An episode of Unsolved Mysteries featuring the case of Little Miss Lake Panasoffkee aired October 14th on NBC. It was an 8-minute long segment, and Sheriff Lieutenant Bill Farmer stated, "We are hoping this will be the final break in the case. This is our only hope, the national exposure." Sheriff Adams even stated during the filming of the episode that Unsolved Mysteries may be their last shot. Bill Farmer was the sheriff's captain in 1992 for the Sumter County Sheriff's Office and was elected sheriff in 1996. But after the Unsolved Mysteries episode, he told the Tampa Tribune that they received over 200 leads after the episode aired, and about 50 of them were promising. He said that these leads included a woman from Orlando who stated her mother had vanished from Ruskin, Florida in 1970. She was going to get her mother's dental records from her father in Puerto Rico to compare to the Jane Doe's. There was also a woman in Pinellas Park who stated that her sister vanished in late 1970 or early 1971, and she was going to send over the department a photo of her sister to compare to the Jane Doe. There was also a prisoner in Kentucky who stated that he and a friend visited a grave of a Jane Doe in northern central Florida, and this friend of his told him that the Jane Doe had been his girlfriend, and he killed her because, quote, "she was lame and getting in the way." Farmer was going to meet this prisoner in person to talk more. There was also another Kentucky man who came forward claiming when he was in prison that he overheard another prisoner say that he had strangled a girl in Florida with a belt. Tons of new leads came in. Them all followed, but still, at the end of the day, they were nowhere closer to finding out who she was. None of these leads seemed to positively be connected to their Jane Doe. It was truly frustrating because the men working on the case had done everything that they could think of. They had basically run out of options at this point. It's almost like the only thing that they could do at this time was just sit back and wait for technology to advance even more. On the screen is a photo of Bill Farmer, Jamie Adams, and Ed Galvin at the location where her remains were found. Sheriff Adams told the Tampa Tribune in an article released on February 19th of 1996 that the best lead they ever had come in came from an inmate on death row in Texas. They discovered that he had been in the service and was in Florida at the time of Little Miss Lake Panasoffkee's murder. He had murdered sex workers in Florida, but when it came to their Jane Doe, he had taken a polygraph test and passed. They were unsure if he had been involved in Little Miss Lake Panasoffkee's murder, but it was just very ironic that he was in the area at the time that she was killed. They had nothing else to really go off of when it came to him. At this time in 1996, her grave was actually still vacant since they exhumed her remains a decade earlier. They didn't want to bury her again just yet in case new methods of possible identification became available. In 2006, an article was released by Daily Sun where they spoke to Sumter County Sheriff's Captain Gary Brannon, and he stated, "We don't necessarily hold out a whole lot of hope of solving who killed Miss Panasoffkee. Our best hope is that we will find out who she was. That's what we really want to do. She's somebody's child. They're still worried about that child, not knowing what happened to her, and we'd like to put that to rest." He went on to say, "People come to Florida even today. A lot of them come here for the wrong reasons, because they think that everybody in Florida lives on the beach and there's all sorts of jobs available. Really, Florida can be a very treacherous place for people who are not familiar with it and are somewhat naive." He stated that unfortunately, they were nowhere closer then to knowing who she was than they were in 1971. In good news, though, they had sent her remains to the FBI in Washington, and they were able to extract DNA from her. Captain Brandon stated that they were forming a cold case review assessment team in Florida at the time after they had worked closely with a cold case team from the Texas Sheriff's Association. Captain Brandon said, "This cold case assessment team concept is profilers, laboratory people, investigators, forensic crime scene people, a medical examiner who all get together and start listening and roundtabling this case. Before you know it, the detectives who make this presentation have 2 or 3 pages of notes to go back and work with to breathe life back into a cold case." In 2006, they definitely felt defeated, but didn't want to give up on this Jane Doe. They didn't want to close the case for good just yet. She deserves her name back. Justice deserves to be served. The next year that there were some further updates in this case was 6 years later in 2012. During this year, Sumter County Sheriff's Detective Darren Norris decided it was time to try a different method, and this is when isotope testing was done. If you do not know what isotope testing is, in simplest terms, scientists can take samples of things like a human's hair or bone and examine the isotopes found in them, and from there, they're able to see where on Earth they may have spent some time in, where they're from. Our bodies are basically sponges when it comes to our environment. The two people working on this new testing was Dr. Erin Kimmerly, assistant professor of anthropology at the University of South Florida, who also directed the Tampa Bay Cold Case Project at the university, and her colleague George Kaminov, a geochemist at the University of Florida in Gainesville. Due to the lead in the scrapings from her tooth enamel and oxygen levels in her teeth, they came to a final conclusion that she may have originated from Greece, most likely south of Athens, possibly in the very small town of Lavrion. Lavrion is a fishing port also known for higher than normal levels of lead contamination due to the local mining. The area has been highly mined since ancient times, being the main source of wealth for Athens during 5th to 4th century BC. There had also been a carbon isotope shift in her hair, showing that she had previously eaten a grain-based European diet, and then more near her roots that were recently grown in, they could tell that she had been eating a corn-based American diet. They believed that she may have moved to America from elsewhere in the world, possibly Greece, within 10 months before her life was taken. Later in 2012, her case would be featured on a show covering cases from Greece. A viewer of the show called in and stated that they believed the woman to be their friend. They gave a name of this friend, Constantina, not only a name, but also a photo. On the screen is a photo of the alleged Constantina. This caller stated that they had been friends back at school, and after graduation, they were both a part of a program sponsored by the International Organization for Migration that sent members of the school to either the United States or Australia for a 2-year work contract. The caller stated that she had been sent to Australia and Constantina had been sent to the United States. She stated that she knew Constantina had a brother named Stelios who served in the Navy, that he actually served in the Navy near Lavrion, the area Erin Kimmerly and George Kaminov believed the Jane Doe to be from. The caller stated that she lost contact with Constantina in the year of 1970. After this, though, another woman called in and they claimed to be the daughter of Constantina. They said that their mother was not actually sent to America, she had been sent to Australia, and that her mother was still alive. This woman had called into the show in Greece, not actual detectives. Now, when it comes to the largely believed theory of this Jane Doe possibly being Greek, Detective Darren Norris started doing a little more digging. According to the Tampa Bay Times, he realized that there was a large Greek community from Clearwater through Tarpon Springs up to Newport Richey. Detective Norris told the Tampa Bay Times, "I was excited. Everyone here was excited. It gave us a much better place to target. Now we have the information that might actually lead us to identify this person and maybe even solve the case." If she was religious, possibly a member of the Greek Orthodox Church, she may have celebrated Epiphany, which is celebrated on January 6th of each year in remembrance of the baptism of Jesus Christ. Each year on January 6th, there is a huge event for this in Tarpon Springs, Florida. Tens of thousands of people attend. This Jane Doe would have lost her life not long after Epiphany. Was she possibly in the area to celebrate the occasion if she did come from a Greek background? Lake Panasoffkee is less than an hour-and-a-half drive northeast of Tarpon Springs. Detective Norris handed out over 6,000 pamphlets regarding their Doe case around Tarpon Springs and spoke to law enforcement there. The Dean of St. Nicholas Greek Orthodox Cathedral in Tarpon Springs stated that most everyone who attends the event there in Tarpon Springs on January 6th is from the United States. No one that he knows of would really travel all the way from Greece for the event there. They would usually celebrate it in Greece. If she had gone to the event, chances are that she had already been in the United States for a period of time. If she was Constantina or another girl coming from a Greek background, could she have been sent to America for work or come here voluntarily and decided to attend the event in Florida, ultimately meeting her untimely and tragic end? Detective Norris believes that someone in the Greek community in the area had to have known who she was, and that the man who killed her may still live in the area as well. You never know. The last main composite sketch done of this Jane Doe was done by renowned forensic artist Carl Koppelman in 2017. I've talked to Carl myself before, and his composite sketches are always so incredibly lifelike, and he always makes sure to add a bit of a background to better tell the story. I've done a bit of diving into this case, and it really seems like the testing that was done years ago is really the last thing that has been let known to the public that has been done when it comes to this case. I'm sure that a lot more has been done, but when it comes to updates, there are really very few. At the very beginning of the video, I did state that I wanted to discuss her watch again, the Baylor watch. If she came from another country, somewhere in Europe, possibly Greece, from my understanding, Baylor was at Zales stores, and Zales stores are here in the United States. I could not personally find any information regarding if they tracked any sort of serial number on the watch to see possibly where the watch had originally sold from, better to narrow down where she may have bought it from, if she bought it herself, or even what year it may have been manufactured. Came across some people online selling vintage Baylor watches, and some people stated they couldn't even find a serial number on their watch, and some people claimed that they could and were asking people online for advice on how to find out the history of their watch. I just could not find much information when it came to the watch that she had on. I'm sure though that the watch would still be in one of the file boxes for her case. One thing that I also want to mention is that there have been Jane and John Doe cases where they did isotope testing and thought that they were from a certain area in the world, and when the Jane or John Doe was finally identified, it was discovered that that person had never lived in that area before. Even George Kaminov stated that it isn't like DNA. When I covered the case of Beth Doe, through isotope testing before she was identified, they thought that she had come from Europe or had spent time there, but she actually had never been to Europe, and this was discovered when they identified her as Evelyn Cologne and learned her entire backstory. I had talked to a family member of Evelyn's myself, and she never spent any time in Europe, but through isotope testing, they thought that she had. Possibly Little Miss Lake Panasoffkee is not even Greek. We don't know. I know that a lot of people, a lot of you are probably wondering about genetic genealogy, the process of taking someone's DNA, creating a DNA profile, and uploading that DNA profile onto a genetic database in the hopes of locating familial DNA, to talk to those family members and to see if they can discover who a person is or was. I did come across a Reddit comment from 3 years ago on a write-up done on this case, and the commenter stated that they were in contact with the lead detective on this case and that they were going through with the process of genetic genealogy. That was 3 years ago though. Where we are right now, I'm not entirely sure. If they were going through with the process of genetic genealogy back 3 years ago, I can't say for certain, but her DNA may be in a database and they may just be waiting for some sort of connection to her. We also have to take into consideration that when a case gets very, very close to being solved, or a Jane or John Doe is very close to being identified, there's so much that goes into it, and they may just be keeping all of that from the public for the time being. There could be huge updates going on right now in this case that simply have not been released to the public as of yet. Until a future update in this case, if you have any information regarding the case of Little Miss Lake Panasoffkee, you are urged to contact the Sumter County Sheriff's Office at 352-569-1600. Like with so many cases out there, especially a Jane or John Doe, where we don't even know who they are, there are so many questions that we just don't have the answers to. Considering in this case, I have not come across any reports of anybody seeing this girl hitchhiking. Usually if there is a case of a suspected hitchhiker, there will be a lot of people coming forward saying, well, I saw them walking along the road, or I saw them at a truck stop, or I gave them a ride myself. There are none of those in this case, so I think there is a high possibility that she may have come from Florida, possibly around this area. You might think yourself, how could somebody come from an area and no one knew who they were? There was a case that I covered quite a few months ago where that happened. In the case of Deborah Mackey out of Texas, who was a Jane Doe for many years, where her body was found and where she was actually from were extremely close to each other. Could that be the story with Little Miss Lake Panasoffkee? As of right now, we don't know. But I wanted to thank you all for taking a little bit of time out of your day to hear about this case. If there are any other cases that you possibly want me to cover here on my channel, make sure to send those over to gabulosiscaserequests@gmail.com. I hope you all have an amazing rest of your day. Stay safe, and I will see you in the next one.